Chapter 11 Intermission. Thabris was in a grim mood, grimmer than usual. Getting himself and people under his responsibility ambushed was rare for him, let alone twice in a day. Thabris Thorn was an in-the-field type of inquisitor without being a psyker himself, and while it was true the ability to use psychic powers was never a mandatory requirement and the vast majority of inquisitors have no affinity for the warp, its sheer advantage was glaringly apparent. A check on the list of who is who of famously celebrated inquisitors amongst the imperial elites, and one could quickly deduce almost all of them were psychers. From the High Protector of the Formosa Sector Torquemada Codiaz, the philosophical Gideon Ravener, and even the questionable Gregor Eisenhorn, all were known for their psychic prowess. In light of that, Thabris had worked extremely hard to get to where he was and paid extra diligence to compensate for that disadvantage. That said, what happened a few days ago had Thabris silently grateful for being a non-psyker for the first time. Something massive was happening in the warp, and all the psychers in his war band were experiencing difficulties, citing constant nightmares and constantly being affected by feelings of utter dread. The conditions became so bad the most severely affected individuals had to be put in a medically induced coma to prevent cases of self-harm. And thus Thabris had been operating without his usual contingent of psychic aids in his field works recently. Would that have helped in not getting ambushed? He was not sure, and that realization only served to sour his mood further. "Sir, we are done here." A male's voice woke him from his thoughts. Thabris turned to his interrogator, silently asking the latter to proceed. Amale continued his report. An order of unknown origin came through, authorizing the Manicores to attack us, but the trails might lead to nowhere. There has to be a collaborator from the inside. Well, that was expected. The Inquisitor sighed internally, his mind lamenting at these predictable outcomes. After decades of working in the field, most things became tiresomely predictable, except for that lady. Thabris found his mind turning at thinking about SYRINE and the fact that he could not get a proper read on her. One moment she was saying she lost her memory and had an almost civilian-like bearing. The next thing he knew, she saved him and his retinue without even flinching at how close they were at death's door. He had secretly observed her expression and breathing aboard the Flame Raven and concluded she never for a second seemed worried during the tense moments. SYRINE was merely sitting on her chair, eyes closed with a peaceful expression when the heavy bolters were discharged at the exact moment it needed to get them out of that deadly predicament. What did that Archdominus call her again? Omniscient Princess? Thabris pondered on these questions and found no satisfying answers. At this point, he could not even be sure if the assassination attempts were aiming at him or her. It was at this time he received a coded message from Neandra. He took a quick glimpse and was stunned by what he read. Amale was quick to notice his master's reaction and politely inquired, "Sir." Thabris did a quick mental check on the chances of their conversation being compromised before deciding it was safe enough to answer his interrogator. SYRINE and HIATUS have made contact with other Imperial worlds. Amale gasped upon hearing the news. While it was technically true HIATUS Rain was the last known astropath on the planet, Thabris' own warband had another skillful astropath who was on his ship orbiting the planet, and the psyker had been trying for days without result. "Sir, that is good news. Are reinforcements coming?" Amale could not contain himself. "I am afraid not," replied Thabris. "They could only contact planets within the subsector. These were of no use to us in terms of reinforcements. Something huge must be going on out there. So we are back to square one," sighed Amale. "I thought she was just coming along to show us her sincerity and get the Archdominus to work with us. To think she actually was able to make contact with other planets," said Thabris before asking, "What is your reading on her?" Amale looked at his master, his mouth half open, but nothing came out for a while. When he was just about to speak, Thabris cut him off halfway. "Other than appearance." That kept Amale's mouth open for a little longer before he sighed again and answered, "I don't know. Without witnessing what she did, she just felt like a civilian." "So, a psychic civilian who can pierce the veil of warp when our astropath has failed, and she could even talk to machine spirits while keeping a pet Archdominus?" Thabris teased. "Might be a transhuman too while we are at it," laughed Amale. "And you said that because..." "Just look at her. She has been with us for hours and never once showed any signs of physical exhaustion, nor did she ever ask for any nourishments." "So you were watching." "Of course." "Is she like Neandra then?" Amale thought for a while before answering. "Maybe, and probably more dangerous." "Why?" "If I met her on the street without knowing better, she would probably just come across as just being breathtakingly pretty. Whereas for Nien, well, you can always tell she is dangerous." "So you can't get a proper read on her too," remarked Thabris. "Sir, A male whispered, with all due respect. Hypothetically speaking, if you were to issue a kill order to Nien now, who do you think will come out alive? Thabris contemplated for a while before deciding to drop the difficult subject and asked another question. You said the trails might lead nowhere. Elaborate. They left so many digital trails behind that most are probably just feints. We have neither the resources nor the time to pursue all of them. I have shown the preliminary findings to our back-end team. They said it might take weeks to sort it out. Unless we somehow have a whole starship's worth of advanced cogitators and a capable mind to wield that at our disposal? I have just the contact here. Since that attack almost took her out, I imagine this would provide sufficient motivation for our new Adeptus Mechanicus acquaintance to expedite his efforts, said Thabris, a hint of a smile appearing on his stern visage. Compile all the data you found together with Flameraven's flight log of the incident. It is time to contact the Archdominus for that luggage arrangement we promised. The Inquisitor ordered. Sometime later, inside a fortified command bunker somewhere near the front line, a high-level strategic discussion was interrupted by a statement uttered by a certain high-ranking individual attending the meeting. Deplorable. A massive hooded and hunched figure snarled as he struck the ground with the end knob of his giant omniscient axe. The impact created a deafening clang, and the primary holographic projector inside the meeting chamber flickered in protest. The figure's sudden outburst put the meeting proceeding to a grinding halt as all eyes were on him, not knowing what to expect next. Being more machine than man, senior members of the Adeptus Mechanicus were known for their almost inhuman dispassionate disposition throughout the Imperium. The fact that such a high-ranking representative of the Order even broke basic etiquette to express his outrage had everyone at the high-level meeting stunned silent. Sitting around a huge table with a holographic projector in the center were some of the most powerful individuals on the planet. Present on one side was the planetary governor, Lord General and generals of the Planetary Defense Force. Sitting across them in their power armor was the Canoness and Palatines of the Adeptus Sororitas. It was Canoness D. Dinah who broke the awkward silence. Esteemed Dominus, what was that about? The words from the supreme leader of Adeptus Sororita's order on the planet seemed to pull the spaced-out Dominus back to the meeting as the latter quickly apologized. Pardon me, Cryptor bowed. I must ask for forgiveness from all you luminaries for my lack of self-control upon hearing reports of the rebels' heresy. Now, came a cultured female voice. Having righteous zeal is a virtue. Though I must confess I am inspired by your show of passion, which is such a rarity for your kin. We were fortunate enough for you to come to our aid in this dire hour, for that we will be forever grateful, said Catalina von Cleus, the current ruling planetary governor. The governor was a gorgeous-looking blonde who looked to be in her early 30s but was in fact over 70 years old. Being powerful and wealthy, she had constant periodical rejuvenate treatments to preserve her youth. Thanks to that, she stood tall and her golden personalized power armor glittered in the meeting chamber. But upon closer inspection, minor battle damages and scratches could be seen here and there. Little did Catalina know that Cryptor wasn't fussing over what was shown at the strategic meeting. The Archdominus had just received a message from Thabris via his secured network and saw what had transpired. The outrage he experienced was so severe that it overcame his multi-layered emotional suppressor, resulting in his unexpected outburst. These damned heretics were so close to ruining his sacred mission again. For the second time in 24 hours, Cryptor was seething with a sense of anger that had last been experienced lifetimes ago. And how could he have not? He had caught glimpses of what was behind the blast door at the end of the activation chamber. There, what might be a true technological treasure trove awaited, and just when he was about to gain entrance to it, unexpected events kept delaying his access to it. Cryptor's cycle had lived for many thousands of years. What little remained of his humanity was locked away in a thrice-reinforced adamantium skull, and his true personality was locked even deeper underneath an operating surface persona. Through certain past experiences, he had learned the hard way on the disadvantage of putting one's indifference on open display, especially when dealing with any powerful individuals who were not adepts of the Omnicia. Ever the practical soul, he had searched for a solution and came across a method that was borderline heretical by the reckoning of his order. Through advanced neuron and cogitator manipulation, he created a subcore of himself and wore it like a mask. This subcore persona was designed to be approachable by non-augmented humans for smoother interaction, and it had worked wonders for him, opening previously closed doors in negotiations. Ever since then, he had been operating as such. His subcore would appear friendly and interact with the outside world, while his true cold, dispassionate, and calculative self would withdraw and run computations on whatever he fancied, essentially running simultaneous thought processing. Very rarely, some event deemed by himself important enough would occur and his true self would surface to take over the autopiloting friendly subcore persona. Cryptor silently stood up as his subcore personality was recalled. As he did so, all pretense of subtle human behavior and speech pattern imitation was dropped as he spoke in a cold, flat tone. This conflict delays the great work of the glorious Omnisia and as such, warrant my undivided attention to end it as soon as possible. I have deemed it necessary to deploy all the resources at my disposal to prove the supremacy of the machine god to the heretics. My cult will be most grateful for the full cooperation from you all to see this through, as will the benefactor of my holy expedition. Though his words sounded courteous enough, all those present felt Cryptor's non-negotiable undertone and some eyebrows were raised. Who is this benefactor you spoke of? And what would be expected from us? One of the generals asked. Cryptor turned to the man, deciding for a moment before answering. It would be better for her to tell it herself, but rest assured, she has authority over all the presiding here. Worry not of the parts you all will be taking. I promise you they are well within your capabilities. That created some murmurs amongst the crowd, but the Archdominus cared not as his attention was already elsewhere. Oh yes, she has the authority, his true core mused to himself as he reviewed the flight log of Gunship Flame Raven over and over again, analyzing its details. Hidden within the record but plain for him to see was the telltale signs that despite suffering from memory loss, SYRINE still had the capability to use her authority, and that provided the key component for him to end this conflict as soon as possible. Chapter 12 Origin. The first memory she had was looking up into the light from a place of darkness. It was bright beyond imagination and seemed to be observing her from the highest point in the heavens. Who are you? She asked, her inner voice seemingly echoing in the endless space. The light seemed to flicker by the merest degree at her question, but did not answer. She, in turn, understood she was being observed and continued to gaze into the light. It continued to shine on her for a long time before it finally communicated with her. I am your creator, the master of mankind. That was the first time she spoke with her creator. Little was directly communicated to her from the emperor, but she knew she had a lot of brothers, and that her creation benefited from the accumulated experiences he gained from their creation. Consequently, while her creation was a lot less resource-intensive than any of her brothers, the master of mankind utilized some of the most advanced arcane techniques known to him. A proud little side project done with leftover resources, so to speak. She was given the name SYRINE by her creator, and she was to become an imperial heiress, with the term heiress used loosely to represent her status as a direct creation of the master of mankind. Such notions were hammered into her even while she was but a faint consciousness in her incubator. Vast collections of knowledge were imprinted into her very being so that she would help her creator and her brothers run the empire when the time came. The empire itself was on the verge of a brand new phase that promised eternal glory to mankind, and her help was needed. She was to aid him on administrative tasks and be an anchor to the empire's internal affairs where brute force and legions of super soldiers were poor tools. This much was communicated to her by her creator, the shining figure who called himself the master of mankind, better known, as she eventually found out, simply as the Emperor. SYRINE, for her part, was ready for a lifetime of service to her creator, to work tirelessly behind the scenes or in front of the masses as the situation required. Be it to follow one of the brothers to further expand the empire or devote herself to further illuminate the galaxy with her creator's light, she was prepared for any task assigned to her. But somehow she was kept in the incubator for maybe too long a time, a deliberate action that was done without her understanding. SYRINE felt she had spent an eternity basking in the Emperor's light while growing inside her incubator. During this period, she learned about the world outside her incubator through a direct knowledge feed via an arcane data link. SYRINE had the impression her creator was always extremely busy. She could feel his attention on her from time to time, but it always went by in a flash, a sudden brief supernova out of nowhere and gone before she could react. Inside the darkness, she continued to accumulate vast amounts of information and could rightly be considered a super sage before she even drew breath. She could recall an endless stream of information and perform hypercomplex mathematics inside her mind. But knowledge without context was sorely lacking, and she grew restless, yearning for more. Once, on a rare occasion when she felt the light's attention lingered on her for more than a second, she took the courage to ask, "Are you my father? And what am I?" Both natural questions after she had reviewed her imbued knowledge countless times about humanity. The light stayed and decided to answer her question. You can call me father, he said and contemplated the second question for a while. Your brothers are primarchs, and as for you, you are lesser than your brothers but greater than the rest of mankind. Primarch, but lesser, so lesser primarch, a primarch minoris? She asked. The terms came naturally to her. The light did not disagree and left it at that. Another rare time when she felt his attention on her during the long dormancy, she asked, Father, when will you let me out? Again the light flickered by the merest of degrees before answering. Not now. Now is the time for might and brute force. Your talents will be needed later. Again, SYRINE was left in the black void for an indeterminate amount of time. We are almost done. One day, out of the blue, the Emperor communicated to her. Your skills will be put to use after this colossal mess is sorted, he said, sounding tired. That very notion brought great discomfort to her, for she could not fathom how someone as powerful as her creator could be under severe duress. What happened, father? She asked. The Emperor didn't reply, but she felt a hint of melancholy from her creator. I hope the next time we speak it will be a happier occasion. It sounded so promising. SYRINE did not know that this was the last time she would be having a proper conversation with her creator. Much later, when she finally escaped the enclosure of her incubator, the Empire was in shambles, unceremoniously gutted by the most brutal war known to humanity. All her brothers were missing after they turned on one another, waging wars across the stars. Her creator, the entity who she had called her father, was technically both insane and eternally on the verge of true death, confined to the Golden Throne. The promising world that was shown to her was no more. In its place laid a grotesque shell of a fallen galactic empire where the dreams of eternal glory died. Consciousness slowly returned to me. I became aware of the sensation of lying in my bed and feeling mentally tired. The first thought that came to my mind, has that overly long and convoluted lucid dream session finally ended? In the said dream session, I apparently took the place of the hidden true daughter of the Emperor, who was in no way canon, and had adventures dealing with armed militias led by renegade space marines, and later helped an astropath to make contact with multiple planets. In the dream, I had psychic powers and met with a lot of interesting people of the Grimdark universe, from a squad of battle sisters, an archtech priest Dominus, an inquisitor, and even an imperial assassin. The unduly lengthy dream session even concluded with an origin brief of her story of how she was kept in an incubator the whole time during the whole Great Crusade and Horus Heresy era. Well, as interesting and realistic as it felt, it was time to get back to my mundane and uneventful life. Perhaps the whole thing was a hint for me to finally start working again on some of the eternally work-in-progress projects from my huge pile of shame. That was my thought as I sighed and reluctantly opened my eyes, only to be greeted by an unfamiliar ceiling. Alarmingly, it was not the ceiling of my own room. This ceiling had a luxury suite feeling to it and had intricate designs filigreed onto it. Mixed within the intricate patterns were the distinctive shape of human skulls. Human skulls on luxury ceiling designs. To my knowledge, there could be only one universe that would go down that path. Startled, I bolted upright and looked around. A room of suffocating luxury surrounded me. On one of the walls was a huge mirror. On it, I saw the reflection of a bewitching white-robed girl with straight platinum hair sitting on top of a huge bed. Oh, the things I would do to get a girl like that into my bed. But, with a numbed mind, I raised my right hand and waved. The girl in the mirror did the same. A surge of indescribable feelings reached me. In my state of confusion and panic, I grabbed the closest thing my hand could reach and flung it with all my strength. Next thing I knew, the said object flew with an absolutely mind-boggling speed and hit the wall with a thunderous thud. Watching bewilderedly as paintings fell off the wall and a flower vase tipped over from the impact, I was rudely reminded of the fact this girl was supposed to be a mini Primarch with a transhuman body. Or was it? I looked down at my hands. Instead of my usual pair of old large hands, I was greeted by a pair of delicate appendages covered with flawless porcelain skin. But I had to be sure. Analytica activated. Name, SYRINE, Primarch Minoris, Psyker Passive Mode, Abnormal Existence. I looked and looked again. The words didn't go away. I wanted to scream and cry, but no sound came out, and a familiar line of message appeared in my vision. Regulus, action override. On the verge of a mental breakdown and seethed with an infuriating amount of frustration, I screamed internally, just what the hell is this, Regulus, thing? Analytica activated. Huh? I can analyze my powers? I watched in astonishment as lines and lines of messages appeared in my vision, giving me detailed descriptions of the ability. In a nutshell, Regulus was a complex, self-invented psychic discipline refined over time by SYRINE herself. The ability consisted of a myriad of passive traits focusing on etiquette, vanity, and glamour. A self-imposed subconsciousness-controlled mental lock was in constant self-policing on my etiquette, hence the reason why I could not scream like a sissy on more than a few occasions. Another major feature it had was the incorporation of users' psychic flow to maintain peak physical appearance. Looking deeper, it even had a more sinister-looking side effect of diverting a small portion of the psychic flow to subtly emphasize the most appealing aspects of appearance onto the viewers. The final effect differs from individual viewers with the same objective of endearment. As I focused on the details of each passive trait, options after options popped up one after another. Take the vanity trait, for example. Upon closer inspection, it was revealed none of SYRINE's appearance was left to chance, from the length of hair and nails to her skin condition. Her, or rather my, natural psychic flow had kept everything in constant check and control. This is the ultimate glamour spell all the female celebrities back in my old world would kill for. No wonder I still look like a supermodel even after just waking up from my sleep. At the very end of the long descriptions was a line of what seemed like a flavor text from the creator of the spell. It read, "For the day when I served my father in the open." Well, that definitely did not happen for the last 10,000 years. Whatever happened between her and the Emperor? Chapter 13 Morning Guests. It was early in the morning when Sister Hospitaller Verita Kern walked tiredly towards the meeting point she obtained from Neandra. They were both members of Inquisitor Thabarus Thorn's retinue and had an amicable relationship within his mini-inquisitorial warband. Generally, be it infiltration or taking out critical targets, Neandra would be tasked with the most critical aspect of the missions, whereas Verita would fix up any of their members who suffered injuries during their mission. It was also Verita's job to fix the occasional interrogation subjects to prolong the interview session when needed. It was a grim duty that she had answered fully with all her talents. Behind her were 3 servitors carrying the luggage of the mysterious individual SYRINE. As Verita turned a corner, she recognized Neandra's silhouette in the distance. The way the assassin stood signaled her to wish to talk, probably for a short mission briefing. "Nien," Verita called out. Neandra nodded, acknowledging her colleague before replying. "Took you long enough." Verita sighed. "Complications with the luggage contents." "Really? With that little amount of stuff?" Neandra looked behind Verita, evidently not impressed by the paltry amount of material present. When the rich and powerful people of the Imperium moved between worlds, it was not uncommon for their personal necessities, amounting to what looks like a whole month worth of supplies for an Astra Militarum battalion. "So, what is the deal with our little miracle lady?" Verita asked. "She is a complicated case. While she seems cordial enough, do tread lightly with her." "But you are here?" Verita scoffed. "Listen," Neandra cautioned and whispered, "if for any reason she went rogue, I am not sure I can stop her." Verita almost gasped at that statement. Her impassive face turned serious for the first time in the conversation. Working alongside Neandra for decades, Verita was well aware of her capabilities, so much so with the latter around as of this moment not even the sudden appearance of a heretical Astartes would faze Verita much. "Throne, are you jesting?" Neandra did not reply, as she never joked about work. "Come on, tell me more. No one has ever mentioned anything about her being able to best you in combat?" Verita pressed. "No, she wasn't much of a fighter from what I had observed." Then, Neandra contemplated for a while before finally answering. "Truthfully speaking, I am not sure. But somehow I have a feeling that if it reaches that point, things will not be easy or pretty because I cannot get a proper gauge on her capabilities nor her personality." "You are making this scary now," Verita protested. "Let's go." The assassin signaled the sister to follow. They walked a short distance before arriving at the room where SYRINE had spent her night. Neandra stopped to look at Verita again, her expression reading, "Try not to offend her," making the latter gulp at how serious the assassin was approaching this assignment. Just as Neandra was about to knock on the door, something triggered her instinct to jump back. A split second later, a thunderous low thud could be heard coming from the room. Verita let out a small yelp at the sudden development and moved away from the door. They stayed silent for a while, standing completely still looking at the door. Finally, Neandra moved slowly towards the door. She produced a spying device, pushed it on the door, and listened. A moment later, satisfied with whatever she heard, the assassin knocked on the door and slowly opened it. The room had a typical interior set up for an important guest. Inside the room, she saw a girl with platinum straight hair sitting on a huge bed. She was hugging her legs, head on her knees as if in some sort of agony. Sirine, Neandra asked. The girl turned her head and looked at the assassin before replying in a dreamy tone. Neandra, morning to you. Are you hurt or anything? No, I was just upset. I still can't recall most of my memories. My colleague is here with your belongings, and she will provide you with a basic medical examination. Neandra signaled Verita to enter. The latter entered the room hesitantly with the 3 servitors behind who put down the luggage bags then left. Neandra observed Sirine seemed to flinch at the sight of the servitors, but her expression was so subtle even with her transhuman perception she could not be sure about it. Servitors are mindless humanoids of flesh and metal used to carry out simple, manual tasks. They can be either made of mind-wiped humans or the vat-grown variants. Servitors are programmed and cybernetically enhanced to serve some specific, rudimentary function and are ubiquitous throughout the Imperium. Considering most Imperial subjects wouldn't even spare servitors an extra glance, the whole observation just came out as odd for the assassin, further reinforcing her own assessment of being unable to read Sirine properly. Then there was the room itself. One side of the wall had a few paintings that fell off and were on the floor. Neandra was sure that was not the case when she did a quick sweep of the room yesterday. Other details she noticed that were out of place was a toppled flower vase and a single bolster pillow on the floor. Neandra walked over, picked it up, and took a closer look at it. On one side of the pillow the fabric appeared to be torn, suggesting the sleeping aid had been subjected to some brutal surface impact force. You threw this? Neandra asked. Sorry, Sirine said as she buried her face on her knees. I did that just now when I realized my memories did not return after I woke up. This is Sister Verita. She also works for Inquisitor Thabarus. Ever the professional, Neandra pushed forward her agenda of the day. Verita stepped forward and performed the sign of Aquila. Well met, Lady Sirine, the Hospitaller said. Sirine gave the Hospitaller an apprehensive look before getting off her bed and properly returning the Aquila sign. Please, just call me Sirine, she said before talking in a resigned tone. Sister Verita, I have to inform you in advance of an issue which I believe Neandra knew as much already. She paused for a while before saying her next words slowly. I'm not a normal human. Verita did a quick exchange of glances with Neandra upon hearing that statement. The latter indicated she should proceed with the planned examination, so Verita pressed forward despite having her own doubts. Perhaps let me do a standard medical examination first? Sirine did not reply but continued to look at the Hospitaller. This was the first time they made direct eye contact, and suddenly Verita understood why her colleague of many years warned her beforehand of this meeting. Sister Hospitaller Verita Kern was not your typical citizenry of the Imperium. To put it into perspective, the ordinary has nothing to do with anything off-world was a common saying within the Empire, as almost all of the mundane masses of the massive Empire will never step foot upon a starship in their entire life, let alone travel between worlds and different star systems. In terms of exposure to the worldliness of what the galaxy has to offer, Verita Kern had seen enough to be ranked amongst the elite within the masses of humanity. In her line of duty, Verita had traveled to various star systems and frequently works in the presence of individuals who have the power to drop death sentences on an entire planet's population. Due to the unavoidable sinister nature of Thabarus' work, she had seen enough behind-the-scene workings of the Inquisition to drive most of the ordinary citizens mad. Verita herself had garnered enough clearance level over the years to receive briefings on the dangers of chaos, sorcery, and demonic entities to know these were no fairy tales. Even the Emperor's mighty space marines, which some of the more backward agricultural world masses worshipped as angels of death, had lost their mythical appeal to her as she learned more and more about them in her line of work. Verita sometimes wonders how those masses would react if she had told them she personally had cut apart some of the space marines who had turned renegade and at this point had seen enough of these angels dead in the interrogation chamber for her to even care. So when the worldly Verita locked eyes with Sirine, she found it strange her level of unease rising rapidly despite the latter showing no sign of malice in demeanor. It was as if just having Sirine's full attention was enough to intimidate her. This experience reminded Verita of the time when she was on the verge of a panic breakdown when she met a transhuman space marine in person for the first time. The symptom of ordinary humans experiencing a high level of unease just by meeting a space marine was actually quite common. They call it transhuman phobia. One would not know this without ever experiencing it firsthand, but meeting an Astartes in real life was far from a pleasant experience. From an unaugmented human's point of view, a transhuman is stronger, faster, and generally smarter than you before even considering their usually far superior equipment. To look directly at a transhuman Astartes would mean the understanding of one's totally inferiority and near-total helplessness against them. Such realization could trigger a sense of survival crisis response at the primal level. Severe cases would render sufferers of said phobia to be non-functional in the presence of any transhuman. But her tendency to suffer from an episode of transhuman phobia was so long ago, it was bewildering that her instinct was giving her all the warnings not to slip up now. It was then Verita noticed SYRINE was not looking at her but passed through her, and then Neandra's voice called out. "Someone is coming. There are 3 of them. One is wearing power armor," SYRINE added casually. Verita felt surprised by that statement. She knew Neandra was operating on a sensory level much higher than a normal human. In fact, so far Verita had heard nothing at all which hinted on people coming their way, much less about being able to discern one of them was equipped with power armor. "Are you expecting guests?" Neandra asked and started tapping into a small data slate. "Not that I remember." SYRINE shrugged. "The record shows representatives of Adeptus Sororitas landed just moments ago," said Neandra after consulting a security log from somewhere. "Via an Aquila lander. I recognize these," added SYRINE suddenly with a seemingly misplaced sense of enthusiasm. "Are you talking with the machine spirits again?" replied a rarely flustered Neandra. "Please restrain yourself from casually showing off your unusual talents." "Arg, I am sorry. We'll observe these in future." SYRINE apologized by putting her palms together and doing a slight bow. It appeared almost comical to Verita, but she was unable to laugh. Neandra was right, she thought. Even the worldly Verita could not discern what was actually going on underneath SYRINE's weird antics. A while later a knock sounded at the door. Neandra answered it and 3 Sororitas entered as predicted. "Good to see you again, Palatine Alicia." SYRINE cheerfully greeted the power-armored sister leading the party. Behind Alicia were 2 more sisters, but of the non-militant orders. One was another hospitaller. The other appeared to be a learned scholar of the Adeptus Sororitas. "Revered lady," Alicia bowed and asked, "How's the situation with your memory?" "I have spoken with my order. They would like to confirm your identity." "About that," SYRINE said apologetically, "not much progress. What do you need from me?" The scholar-looking sister stepped forward, formed her Aquila sign and spoke. "Greetings, I am Wellman Amayo of the Dialogus Order. We humbly request your cooperation." On that statement, SYRINE took a look at all the guests in her room before saying, "Very well, I would like to know for certain myself too." Chapter 14 Grim Prospect. Alone in a meeting room, I was sitting on a huge chair waiting for an arrangement from the Adeptus Mechanicus. My mind was rerunning the events that happened a few hours ago with perfect clarity. So the medical examination happened. I had my body scanned by the medical devices inside the fortress, and the result was interesting, to say the least. Both the hospitalers went quiet after the preliminary scans revealed I had 2 hearts and a myriad of unknown organs inside my body, confirming my transhuman status. Head scans looking for brain damage were inconclusive as the core structure of my brain appeared different from that of a normal human. Verita's data slate was a property of the Inquisition, and it was unable to access certain inquiries of the scan results, citing insufficient security clearance level. Acting on another hunch, I asked Verita if I could try to access the restricted information with the credentials on my pendant instead of looking for Thabris' inquisitorial rosette, which would take a lot of time. "You could certainly try," replied Verita with a stiff smile. So I did. After a few trials of figuring out how to do that, to everyone's surprise, I was able to bypass the restriction using my pendant. Comparing the scan results with the information within classified data revealed an organ called the amortis gland existing inside my brain. The information regarding this gland was highly guarded. In its entry there was but a line stating genetically engineered organ existing within the cerebral cortex of each of the primarchs, with no additional information offered. Wellmana, the sister Dialogus who was among those present, started trembling after reviewing all the information. Her previously impassive demeanor melted away as she struggled to reconcile with the implications of what she saw. Whereas Palatine Alicia was the complete opposite. She was ecstatic of the result and wanted immediately to kneel before me again, but I stopped her. "Well," I said, trying to defuse the unpleasant atmosphere which was getting very serious, "there might be a mistake, and I would like a second opinion." But Neandra was having none of that, immediately ordering a complete data purge on all the medical devices and issuing a straight gag order on all those present. Representatives of the Adeptus Sororitas left hastily after that, citing the need to report to their order urgently. Verita went somewhere, no doubt to report to Thabris on the findings. Having nothing better to do, I went back to my room. Earlier, Verita had handed over several huge, solid-looking space-age luggage which had belonged to SYRINE. Or me. This is so weird. After fumbling with them for a while, I managed to unlock some only to find mostly clothing stuff inside. I guess girls are kind of the same whatever universe you are in, but I have to mention the quality of these clothing wear was out of this world. Even a total novice like me could tell by simply looking and feeling their texture. Incidentally, the white robes I was wearing all this time were of the same quality and never seemed to get dirty. Later I received news that a representative of Adeptus Mechanicus, probably working under Cryptor, was coming to see me, and some arrangement requests were made in advance for the meeting. There was some time until the appointed hour, so I decided to take a quick bath since I had all my spare clothes and was in this attire for a full whole day already. During the brief shower, I found myself spacing out and was unable to look at the mirror. By the way, the toilet bowl was so solidly built I wondered if the ceramic used was the same type to be found on a Space Marine's armor. It felt sturdy enough to repel small arms fire. And there I was, bathed and changed to another piece of wardrobe for an unknown occasion. Sitting on a huge, ornate chair in the assigned room alone, I finally had a quiet moment for myself. For the first time, I realized my senses could hear sounds and see details that should have been impossible for a normal human. When I looked with enough concentration, my vision could pick up the fine cracks on the ceiling, and I heard the footsteps of the Adeptus Mechanicus representative escorted by Neandra coming long before they reached the door. I am no longer human. The realization hit me like freezing water. By sensory data alone, I could even time the exact moment Neandra was about to knock on the door. "Come in," I said before Neandra knocked. The door opened and a tech priest entered with the assassin. The tech priest stepped forward, bowed and candid. "Lady SYRINE." I ran Analytica on him. The reading came back. Name, Dataliad Ving, Posthuman, Tech Priest. "Greetings. While I believe we have met before, you will have to excuse me. I recently suffered from amnesia and can't recall my past. I have heard. It is the will of Omnicia. The eyes of the Omnicia are ever upon us. How should I address you?" "Just Dataliad." "So you do remember my name. I am honored." "Well, that was some easy brownie point. Dominus Cycle wishes to confirm your current condition and converse with you, Lady SYRINE. He is currently tied down at the front lines preparing for a major engagement, so I am here to set up secured communication. Dominus Cycle must be how Cryptor's underlings addressed him." I nodded and the tech priest went to work, setting up a device he was carrying that was the size of a suitcase. A few moments later he was done. It came to life and a huge holographic projection of Cryptor flickered into existence. This scene was like the mirror image of a certain classic sci-fi movie scene when the Dark Lord was conversing with his master. "Crypto." I greeted the massive hologram. "Good to see you in good health and spirits, SYRINE. How is your condition now?" The Dominus candid. "About the same, but I seem to recall some distant memory during my dream in my sleep. Unfortunate, but this might take time. Dataliad, secure the site. I have confidential matters to discuss with the princess." Moments later, I was alone again in the meeting room, but this time with an active hologram of Cryptor talking to me. He had formed up with the sisters, and the planetary governor then surveyed the situation on the front. After doing so, he had come up with a plan to resolve the conflict as soon as possible. No doubt it was because he wanted to quickly get to whatever new toys he found behind the blast door in the activation chamber. "Before we start," I said while holding up a hand, "tell me what you know about me and what we are doing on this planet." Cryptor tilted his head slightly upon hearing my question, but proceeded to answer after a slight pause. "You are a direct creation by the physical manifestation of Omnicia himself dating back from 10,000 years ago. We were on a secretive sacred expedition here to activate a psychic beacon to prevent this whole sector from being swallowed up by the impending events. What is the origin of this psychic beacon?" "Undisclosed." "How can you be so sure about my credentials?" I asked. "I had personally verified that. Your DNA, the hyper-advanced level of your transhumanity, the Primarch-grade internal organs inside you, and the imperial authority you wield. All that is without a doubt from the apex of Imperium. Did I ever mention anything about what we were supposed to do after the beacon's activation?" I decided to risk it with such a question, banking on his current willingness to talk. "Unfortunately, no. You were supposed to reveal that after we assessed the situation, and you promised me access to the technology inside the vault," Cryptor replied. "One last question," I said while taking out my Aquila pendant. "What is this, and why was I able to take control over certain functions in the Inquisitor's gunship?" "To my knowledge, from what you revealed before, that would be the Imperial Authority Rosette. If we think of the standard inquisitorial rosette as the key to open all Imperial doors, yours would be a master key. With it and your unique physiology, almost all Imperial standard cogitators and machine spirits in service will recognize you as an administrative-level user. It also contains an advanced microconversion field emitter that provides a reinforced energy protection field. Cryptor's word brought me back to the time when I somehow survived direct grenade hits unscathed back then when Alicia tried to shield me with her body. Thinking back, there were weird light flashes happening when the grenade impacted on top of us, so that was the conversion field that saved me. I had received the report of the Flame Raven attack incident. Rest assured the perpetrators will be uncovered and punished accordingly. Praise the Omniscient, you still retained access to your authority, but kindly allow me to verify your current capacity to utilize it. He then proceeded to put 3 skull probes into view. Please, see if you can control these via the communication link. I specially prepared these to verify the viability of our stratagems for the upcoming major engagement. So, he received reports from Thabris, and from there he already deduced I can use my authority to access machine spirit. Very well. I closed my eyes, focused my mental attention on my pendant, and reached out for any cybernetic connection. Accessing. 1. Responding machine spirit within the vicinity. 3. Responding cogitators via communication link #network ID. Connect? Yes/no++. Cogitators are the term for computers in this universe, so I can directly access them as well. Interesting. Connect me to all 3 cogitators on the communication link. Accessing cogitators via communication link ++. Connection accepted. ++. I opened my eyes and willed the probes to fly. They lifted and hovered in the air. Hey, this is kind of fun. I proceeded and had them fly circles around Cryptorer, and to my own amazement, I could actually simultaneously control all 3 probes with ease. Very good, Cryptorer remarked. Now, a real test if you please. Kindly land the probes and we will proceed to the next phase. So I did as told and waited. Cryptorer worked on a data slate and a new scene flicked into existence from the holographic projector. It was a composite of multiple scenes featuring military-looking outposts. Please see if you can connect to these, said Cryptorer. Is this a drill or? I looked at the Dominus, and he was waiting on me eagerly, so I closed my eyes and tried again. Accessing. 1. Responding machine spirit within the vicinity. 15. Responding cogitators via communication link #network ID. Connect? Yes/no++. Yes to all 15 cogitators on the communication link. Accessing cogitators via communication link ++. Connection accepted. ++. Connection accepted. ++. They all responded. I am connected. I opened my eyes and informed him. Excellent, said a delighted Cryptorer. Now, is it possible for you to shut down their sensor arrays and void shield for at least 60 seconds? A brief review of the options presented within the connections later. I think I can. Very well, please do after my countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cease all sensors and void shield operations. My command pulse went through the link. Complying. Complying. Done. Please hold that for at least 60 seconds. A timer appeared in the corner of the hologram counting down from 60 seconds. Just as it reached the 30 seconds mark, I started receiving updates with the data link. Initiating system boot up. Huh? It appears someone was restarting the systems from their end. Cease all operations. I sent back. Complying. Initiating system boot up. Another update came in. Cease all operations. I sent again. Complying. The cyber whack-a-mole scenario persisted for a while until all the outposts in the hologram feed suddenly exploded one by one in near simultaneous timing just as the timer hit 0. Looking at the montages of destruction, I suddenly understood what just happened. He had used the openings created by my authority to launch strikes at the outposts. Marvelous, simply marvelous, praised an ecstatic Cryptorer as he was making a sound that was close to laughter. The heretics had made a fatal mistake in their haste to forsake the Imperium. They did not have the time nor the expertise to hard reset all their war assets, so fundamentally all their primary assets are still subservient to your authority, he said and bowed. From the picked feed of the ruined outposts, I saw people scrambling out of the buildings and followed by more explosions. Though the images were quite small since they were taken from a distance and cramped into a composite display, my transhuman perception could still pick up the distinct impressions of humans being blown to bits. I had just unwittingly become a key component for a military operation that resulted in mass killings. The carnage continued on the feed for a while until it was abruptly cut off, but I could still somehow see it, my mind perfectly recreating the scenes of human body parts flying everywhere. With that done and confirmed, I humbly request your review on this upcoming operation. Cryptor continued as a map that must have been the front line appeared in the hologram. We will lure the heretics into a decisive engagement, and the Dominus talked and talked until I cut him off. Crypto, I said, noticing my change of mood. He stopped. My body started trembling slightly and the world slowed. Thought acceleration activated without prompt. Is this rage or fear? But this is weird. Why is my thinking process not clouded with this amount of emotion? And why was I feeling confused if we were just killing heretics? I had been used as a weapon, and it bothered me more than I expected. The ground seemed to shake as my inner feelings blared, but it was tempered by the cold logical side of my situation analysis. I soon realized the situation of my helplessness. I was so helpless without the people around me at this point in time, so boundaries have to be set. That's all I can do for now. I closed my eyes again and pushed down my emotions and planned my words. Thank the throne for thought acceleration. This would appear less than a second for Cryptor. After some deliberation, I spoke again. I appreciate your constant support and everything you have done for me, but Crypto, you have to notify me beforehand if my action will result in the loss of human lives. I delivered my conditions. The massive hologram of the Dominus kept utterly still for a few seconds before he bowed and complied. Understood. Please, continue with the previous topic, I said. So he continued with his presentation on how to draw out the rebels' main forces in a decisive clash, in which a massive trap will be sprung by using my authority to cut off their communications and turn some of their best weapons against them, thus securing a victory for the Loyalists. It was a foolproof plan on paper, so cunning even the cheesy power gamers at my old gaming club would concede in its diabolical genius, but this is not a game. That means many people will die, but how many? Estimated casualties? I asked, again surprised at my voice not breaking. By my best estimation, about 150,000 frontline personnel killed, 350,000 personnel wounded or captured, 3,500 tanks, 10,000 combat vehicles, 4,000 artillery pieces, and around 400 aircraft will be destroyed, came his reply. My soul squirmed at the numbers. At the same time, my mind caught on the keyword of wounded or captured, so I had to make sure and asked again, would that be on both sides? That is the estimated numbers just on the heretic side, not including the over 100,000 inevitable casualties on our side and the eventual fallout affecting civilians in the millions. Cryptor answered matter-of-factly. Chapter 15 Introspection. Alone in the meeting room again, my head swelled with the idea of being responsible for the direct death and misery of close to 250,000 people and indirectly affecting the lives of millions more. On the flip side, logically speaking, if we do not end this swiftly, that number will balloon upwards with no end in sight, so this would be the best way forward. But deep inside, I was just a gamer geek, not some imperial heiress of a galactic spanning empire who might be able to casually disregard that sort of numbers with a contemptuous scoff. For reasons unknown, when Cryptor told me the number of estimated casualties, it made me recall the vague, horrible scenes I saw back in the activation chamber when pressed by Thabris. Now that I think about it, ever since coming to this world, everything I had experienced could be recalled with absolute clarity, all except for that moment. The strange implications sent crippling fear down my spine. So many questions, so little time. I had promised Cryptor to get back to him within the next 24 hours should I want any revisions done with his plan, or he will just proceed with the planned massacre with me involved as the main catalyst. Somehow, my instinct was telling me that going down that path of mass casualties was to tread the path of eventual damnation. Getting a grip on myself, I re-examined my current predicament and realized I needed to know exactly where I was in the timeline to exploit my knowledge of the universe. Fortress Endurance Sigma. I reached out. ++ received and ready to serve. Authority. ++. What is the current calendar year? 999.m41. As soon as I heard 999.m41, the reason why Astronomicon went offline became apparent to me. This must be the time when Chaos War Master Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade had concluded with the destruction of the fortress world Cadia, resulting in the great rift known as the Cicatrix Male Dictum being unleashed onto the Imperium. It was a galaxy-shattering event with 3 books released in conjunction with it, foreshadowing the return of Robot Gilliman, Primarch of the poster boys of the Grimdark universe, the Ultramarines. I took a deep breath, organized my thoughts, and asked again. Show me our location on the galactic map. Complying. There was a delay before a three-dimensional map of the galaxy materialized in my mind, and my jaw dropped. I saw it, an indicator on a slowly spinning galaxy pointing in the middle of nowhere at the edge of Imperial space, at an area that seemed to be one of the farthest frontiers at the end of the Great Crusade. Location: Subsector Terminus Obscura, Externus System, Planet Nusquam. A speck of unremarkable dust on the edge of the Imperial stage. We were so far off from any major Imperial system that the whole subsector might have died off for centuries before any central administrative staff would notice. Those implications made my blood run cold. The Imperium will soon enter one of its most turbulent times in history. It will be so occupied by its troubles during this period. Even if we did successfully get a message out, no one will be coming. Cut off from the rest of the Imperium, suffering from a civil war with a decisive apocalyptic battle happening soon, not to mention a looming renegade space marines threat and more. Even if we survived all that, this world will be so weak it will just fall over if any more horrors from the hostile galaxy came forth. And my instincts were screaming just that, more horrors are coming. Running away was also out of the question, assuming I could even convince Crypterer to abandon the technological wonders just in front of him to pack up and leave. I questioned the odds of us getting back to any major Imperial system in one piece with the Astronomicon offline here. Why am I in so much trouble? What did SYRINE tell me on that foggy road? I searched my mind and her words came clear as day. Help me and the others. In exchange, my abilities, my body, and my soul are yours. She had said the words with such sincerity when I promised to help, but I didn't know she meant it so literally. Darn it, girl, why do you run away from all these? Why did she ask for my help when she had this much power? Was there anything I can even offer up when compared to a literal minor demigoddess like her? I have got nothing but a heap of cheesy gaming experiences and a boatload of pop culture stuff to show for throne's sake. I felt cornered, my core shaking at the looming crisis. A sense of existential dread started creeping over, making me want to curl into a ball and cry. This feeling was eerily reminiscent of a familiar anime scene, where this boy who was the pilot of the most powerful mecha in his world, despite the power he wielded, always succumbed to his emotional weakness and did not pull his weight. I remembered scoffing at such a scenario, but now that I was smacked right into one, it sure isn't fun, is it? Baka Shinji. Am I losing my mind? What if I had been SYRINE all along and my gamer geek life was a dream instead? Do I have any proof that my old self ever existed? Suddenly doubting both my past and present, I tried recalling the details from my gamer geek life and found that while my memories of them were vivid, they felt somewhat faded from my current point of view. Was it because of my current transhuman level of senses? This world seemed so vivid, so beautiful. A beautiful yet grim world. Wasn't there a song from that anime with the title of Beautiful World? Feeling depressed about the grim situation, I tried to mentally recall that song in my head. First, the theme came back slowly, then the melody. Bit by bit it gathered, and before I knew it the song was perfectly replicated and repeating itself in my head. Beautiful world, beautiful boy, the song went. Somehow hearing the music in my head calmed me down. Since this song exists, so should my past. Can I play it in the physical realm? Will this count as piracy across dimensions? Desperately needing a distraction, I looked for solutions for the technical challenge at hand, and the formidable intellect locked within me started working. It seemed like I had an instinctual level of understanding of the technologies in this world. After some tinkering, I linked up with the cogitators of the fortress and did the data processing of converting thoughts into sound, a myriad of tweakings and data conversions later. A digital record of the song was successfully created and stored in my pendant. Play sound data, beautifulworld.mp3 on local speakers. Complying. Will it play? Suffice to say this was not a real MP3 file. I just labeled it as such for ease of self-use. If this worked, it might be the first known case of plagiarism across dimensions and time. I held my breath. The speakers came to life, and as if magic, a remastered copy of the music started playing perfectly in the meeting room. Beautiful world. It played. It played. I sighed and slumped on my chair, losing myself in the familiar song that echoed in the meeting room, letting my intellect work to passively optimize the acoustic quality until it hits the right spots. Warm tears would be flowing down my cheeks now if not for Regulus, keeping my composure in check. After calming down, my survival instinct kicked in and my mind started moving again. I realized now was the rare precious moment I could sit down and think. From my experience, once something massive in life starts, you will just get sucked right into the center of the maelstrom without time and space to reflect on what to do. So I did exactly that, abusing my ability by spamming thought acceleration to review what I had known so far again and again. A lot of critical questions began to surface as I took an in-depth review of the current situation. Take the opposition forces, for example. Both the armed men and Marines who attacked us did not look tainted by chaos by any stretch. I had also by this point dug into the available reports inside the database of the fortress on them and found no clear evidence of the rebels renouncing the Emperor or pledging their allegiance to ruinous powers. So while working with a suspicious group of Space Marines might be their biggest sin here, to label all the people on the opposition as heretics without reserves might be too hasty of an action that left no room for any other recourse. As to why Cryptor was directly calling them heretics, well, he is from the Mechanicus, and anyone who deprived a member of the Mechanicus of new toys is a heretic from their point of view. I chewed on the situation, digesting and looked closely at it until a rough way out of this dire predicament could be seen. But it was riding on so many knife edges I winced by just looking at the end product. First, I will need to work on minimizing human and hardware casualties in the upcoming battle. As massive as this planetary civil war was, a sense of foreboding told me it will be nothing compared to what was looming in the future. My best odds of moving forward would be having as many layers of stuff between me and the cosmic horrors which were no myths in this universe. After all, being cut off from the rest of the Imperium with an active psychic beacon would be like walking alone in the middle of the night in a death world forest infested with apex predators with a huge lantern in hand. You are basically expediting your own demise. On the other hand, shutting down the beacon presented too many complex questions and would need a thorough review. I needed to leverage my position and knowledge of this universe to engineer an optimized outcome, or else I might suffer a fate worse than death. That scenario was again not a myth in this world. With my mind made up, I accessed the Fortress communication network. After some guesswork, I connected myself to the Vox unit that most probably belonged to Neandra. It connected, but no reply came. Neandra, I asked on the Vox. SYRINE? How did you? Never mind. What do you need? Somehow I was enjoying the assassin sounding flustered more than I should. A good thing was with Regulus, none of my smugness will ever show. I need to talk to Inquisitor Thorn. Kindly arrange for me a Vox communication with him. That can be done. By the way, the representatives of Adeptus Sororitas are still here, and they wish to talk to you again at your next convenience. Neandra replied. Didn't they leave some time ago? They had a change of plans at the last minute. Only their shuttle had left the fortress to fetch more of their people over. So Alicia and her companions were still here. Guess I was blindsided by the message log their Aquila lander had left the fort. Very well. When can my Vox call with Inquisitor Thorn happen? Hold on. Attempting to get him now. A moment later, Thabrus' stern voice entered the chat. Yes, asked the Inquisitor, as ever he cut straight to the point. Sir, SYRINE is on the line and she wishes to speak with you. Neandra out. Her exit of the Vox was signaled by a system chime. Well, Inquisitor, I have some critical information regarding our situation and wish to discuss them with you. I said. Interesting. I am with the governor now to formally endorse her legitimacy as the sanctioned ruler of this planet and review their actions to regain control. That would mean he would be at where Cryptor would be. Are you aware of the Archdominus plan? I asked. We had a brief talk. I was pleasantly surprised he did have something concrete to show way before the promised dateline. Thank the throne for competent allies. This saves so much time. So, do we discuss what I have to share now? Better not. Security issues aside, I have a few matters to attend to now. Either way, I plan to see you tomorrow morning. In that case, I hesitated a bit before asking, may I inquire, are those psychers orbiting the planet your people? If so, can I please ask you to bring one to see me? Preferably one who is familiar with the perils of the warp. There was a slight pause before he answered. Very well, I will see what I can do. That knowledge was acquired when Aratus and I were making contacts with other Imperial worlds. Back then I had sensed some peculiar existences that were too near to be on other planets. But then I disregarded it because of the "this dream will end soon anyway" mindset. A while later, it struck me that both Thabrus and Cryptor should still have their starships nearby, which meant the Inquisitor should still have a few psychers on orbit for whatever reason. We finalized the details before ending our conversation, then I went to look for Sister Alicia. With my direct access to the Fortress digital map and security system, I located the young Palatine in no time. She was seated in an open area talking with her companions. Lady SYRINE. Alicia saw me from a distance and stood up, prompting the other two sisters to hastily stand up as well. Something about how they looked tenser just by my mere presence did not sit right with me, but there was little I could do about it. Alicia, I said, intentionally skipping her title in an attempt to make things sound more casual, you were looking for me? Alicia nodded before replying, yes, we wish to inform you that Canoness Diadina, the highest office of my order, is coming to see you. She should be here before nightfall. Yet another appointment. I got a feeling things will get a lot busier before calming down. Chapter 16 Order Founding. 5 aircraft were speeding through a rapidly darkening purple sky in Delta formation. An Aquila lander escorted by 4 Lightning Air Superiority fighters hinted how important the personnel it was ferrying was as it cut through the air with haste to its destination. Inside the passenger compartment of the Aquila lander were 3 senior members of the Adeptus Sororitas. Seated in the middle was a hooded woman wearing an ornate set of power armor covered by an elaborated cloak. The woman had delicate yet stern features. She looked to be in her early 40s, but she had actually been serving her order for more than 7 decades. Deep in thought, the woman's eyes were downcast while her right hand autonomously pushed on the beads of a set of intricate prayer beads with a shining symbol of the Mini-Storum attached on a golden chain. Seated beside her were 2 of the best Celestian sisters the order had to offer. One of the sisters was carrying a long object wrapped in silk cloth and sealed with a myriad of ancient-looking purity seals. The hooded woman muttered in silent prayers as she moved the prayer beads with practiced ease even with a gloved hand. At times her sight wandered to the object covered in silk cloth. Just half a day ago, she had rushed back from the front line to fetch it from their monastery after receiving the coded message from Wellmana. The sister Dialogus she had sent to accompany Sister Alicia to verify something very important after hearing her dubious report. Young Alicia was very recently promoted to the rank of probationary palatine due to heavy casualties and thus in accordance with the tradition of their minor order. Was briefed on the hidden legends of their order's founding and to be on the lookout for a certain prophecy. The Order of the Shining Beacon was an ordo militant minores of the Adeptus Sororitas founded from a small splintered group that originated from the Order Majores of our martyred Lady around 1,000 years ago. Legend has it the founder of the order was an unnamed Celestian who ended up alone on the battlefield assaulting a stronghold during one of its many crusade wars. Cut off and surrounded by enemies, she vowed to sell her life dearly by making a last stand and fighting late into the night. Long out of bolter shells, the unnamed Celestian nonetheless fought on until even her chain's word finally broke. In the delirium of her supposed final moments, a shining figure with a sword appeared out of nowhere and fought by her side. It was said the radiant stranger fought like death incarnate and swiftly cut down all the enemies surrounding them, but yet more enemies approached. But the shining figure cared not. Like vengeful lighting, the figure went around and soon dispatched all of the enemies with contemptuous ease. After it was done with the grim task, the mysterious figure stood still and looked at the befuddled sister. Even in her miserable state, the Celestian still remembered her mission, so she pleaded to her mysterious savior for help to carry out the Emperor's work. The figure contemplated for a while before asking her to fulfill a promise in return. The Celestian considered her odd circumstances. Putting her mission first, she promised the mysterious figure she would do any future biddings as long as it does no harm to the Imperium and only after they took down the enemy stronghold together. The shining figure nodded and agreed to her ridiculous proposal but asked her to rest, citing her assistance was not needed. Wounded and totally exhausted, the Celestian fainted while watching the figure walk towards the stronghold alone. When she finally regained consciousness, the Celestian found herself on top of the enemy stronghold with a mountain of slain enemies below her and a large mastercrafted sword in her hands. After briefly returning to her order as a celebrated hero with a mysterious sword, the unnamed Celestian was soon receiving visions for the mission she had promised to fulfill. She was instructed to leave and start her own order at a faraway corner of the Imperial frontier. Though she seriously doubted her capacity for such a monumental task, she kept to her promise and did her best by going through the proper channels and sent her request to found a new order minores at the far-flung corner her vision had shown, not expecting to hear anything back in her lifetime. None knew what really happened in the bottomless pit that was the colossal bureaucracy of the Imperium, but by the miraculous odds of less than 1,000,000,000 to 1 her request was granted by the higher-ups. In less than a decade after her application was submitted, the approval had come with the blessings of Adeptus Mini-Storum, the official state church of the Imperium of Man. So the unnamed Celestian set off with faith, a nameless sword, and the approval of the church, and after many more years and overcoming more obstacles, finally founded the Order of the Shining Beacon in this world. The new canoness would receive many more visions during her life, the contents of which were mostly kept as secret prophecies by the higher-ranking individuals within the order and their designated scholars. The founder was said to have regretted not being able to meet the prophesied figure that would one day deliver them from their darkest hour in her later years, and decreed her own name was to be struck from the records, for she had done little but to fulfill a promise, and as such was not worthy to be mentioned. In the end, the sister preferred to remain unnamed, like the nameless sword she received that started off her life's incredible mission, leaving behind the Holy Daughter prophecy. Hence, when Alicia, who was tasked with the protection of their monastery, came to the front line with an Adeptus Mechanicus Archdominus unannounced, it had surprised everyone, and to top it off, the young lady had excitedly reported the possibility of the prophecy coming true. It had shocked them all, since at this point in time, after 1,000 years, the founder's prophecies were becoming more legends than facts. Canoness, a firm female voice called out in the confines of the compartment inside the Aquila lander, but lost in thought, the hooded woman failed to catch someone addressing her by title. Canoness Diadina, the voice called again. Ah, Sister Markila. Pardon me, I was spacing out. The hooded woman looked up and replied to the Celestian, who was not charged with guarding their relic. You look tired, replied Markila Moret, the Celestian superior. She paused before asking the question that had been on her mind since the sudden retrieval of their order's most sacred relic, the nameless sword. So what did Wellmana say in her report? Wellmana Mayu was one of the designated dialogus scholars allowed to study the prophecies of their founder in this generation, thus she was sent together with Alicia to verify the claims. Didina closed her eyes and, after a while, produced a data slate and passed it to Markila. While the two women were separated by ranks, they had been friends in private for decades, so Markila did not hesitate and looked into the report that was meant for the highest office of her order. Match plausible, needs final verification. Markila read the short report softly, feeling her hair stand on their end, and asked her next question. Do you think it could be real this time? Only the Emperor knows, replied Diadina, but we are certainly at our darkest hour. As if this unexpected uprising is not enough to test us, there are some concerning reports in the last 24 hours about weird things happening in the warp and unusual psychic phenomena. As a matter of fact, I just received reports that even the light of the Emperor is now denied to us. The canoness retrieved her data slate, conjured out different reports, and passed it again to her friend. As the Celestian superior gasped at the grim reports, Didina looked at her companions and explained, This matter for the moment is not public knowledge. Keep it confidential for now. Both Celestians nodded in compliance. Markila read and reread the data slate before asking, Does Inquisitor Thorn know of this? Didina retrieved her data slate before replying, Of course, he had personally verified it with me on this matter. Speaking of which, the Holy Daughter candidate is actually under his care at the moment. Thabris Thorn had just very recently arrived on the planet in hot pursuit of several suspicious cults and found himself in a civil war. Trusting neither side of the conflict, Thabris had instead contacted the Sororitas to work with them and had been operating clandestinely for a while before just coming out to endorse the governor of her legitimacy. To think, the rebels actually had renegade Astartes working behind the scenes for them, Markila remarked with great distaste, righteous fury blazing in her eyes. It seems the arrival of the candidate had forced their hand, but, said Canoness Didina before trailing off, unable to hide the grimace in her voice before continuing in a whisper. The most unfortunate thing had happened. A group of rebels led by renegade Marines had successfully ambushed her, and it is said she is suffering from amnesia now because of it. Even with her many decades of practiced straight discipline in the Order, Celestian Superior Markila could not hide her shock upon hearing the terrible news and blurted out her thoughts, thrown on Terra. Have we already failed when it counted the most? That? I am afraid I have no answer, Canoness Didina confessed. The fortunate news is she is reported to be still coherent and functional as a person. Lastly, there is this mention that she had gained access to the inner sanctum and an arcane device believed to be a psychic beacon was activated. Inquisitor Thorn had also verified this with me, but since most high-functioning psychers had been bedridden of late, this is still under investigation. Markila went quiet for a while before asking. None of the Founder's legends and visions had ever mentioned of such a thing, but it bears an eerie resemblance to our Order's name. Could it be the true purpose of our Order is to protect the beacon the supposed prophesied Holy Daughter had activated? That this happened right as we lost the light of the Emperor could not have been a coincidence. Again, I know not, replied Didina. I can only pray to him on Holy Terra this trip will grant us the answers to all these. The canoness involuntarily looked at the relic again and sighed softly. Join me in prayer, sisters. Let us seek strength and guidance from the Emperor. Outside the armored compartment of the Aquila lander, Fortress Endurance Sigma loomed on the horizon. Chapter 17, The Nameless Sword. It was the first time I realized approaching me could be a daunting task for some people. Sister Dialogus Wellmana Mayer looked apprehensive and nervous as she approached me to verify if my name was written correctly for her record. Wellmana herself looked more similar to the older metal model, which represented a Sister Dialogus than the newer plastic version. Sans the ridiculous scrolls hanging around her body plus missing a staff, her general hairstyle and the eyepiece she wore matched the metal model. After I verified my name, i.e. SYRINE, was spelt correctly, this still felt weird every time as I can talk and read Low Gothic like I have known them for life. Wellmana's next question boggled my mind on an obvious but little discussed matter. I am sorry, my lady, but your name is simply just that? Do you have a surname for me to complete my record? The scholar timidly asked. My thought acceleration activated upon hearing her question. Yeah, why doesn't SYRINE have a surname? Almost everyone important enough seems to have longer names, right? Like I had learned the name of the current planetary governor was Catalina von Cleus from the Fortress database, and she was quite good-looking. But wait, suddenly to my shock, it occurred to me amongst the Primarchs, a lot of them like Magnus, Ongron, Sanguinius, Fulgrim, and Alfarius seemed to have always had a single name. Even Perturabo, who was disclosed in the lore to have known his own name since birth, had ever only gone around with a single name. I vividly recalled an audio drama featuring the Primarch going, I am Perturabo, when his birth pod landed near a mountain and he was surviving as an angry baby for a while. So I looked at Wellmana and replied sincerely, yes, I have but a single name. Do we still have some time before the canoness arrives? Can anyone tell me about the prophecy Alicia mentioned? My easygoing attitude seemed to have eased the sisters a bit, so we sat down before Wellmana started telling me the stories and legends from the founding of the minor militant order of the Shining Beacon. It was a story that happened about 1,000 years ago. An unnamed sister returned triumphant from an impossible mission with a mysterious sword. She later received visions from dubious sources telling her to travel here and establish the Shining Beacon Order. Officially, that was where the story ended. Unofficially, said sister had received more visions foretelling a prophecy about the coming of a true daughter of the Emperor who would be their salvation in their darkest hour. It was known as the Holy Daughter Prophecy. My troubled senses were tingling just from hearing the vague details passed down as legends. The story contained a shining figure with no more description who could cut through the throng of enemies like paper mock-ups with a sword. Then the poor sister started receiving vague visions asking her to leave her home and the people she knew behind, bravely travel a large swath of the hostile galaxy to establish a new branch of Sororita's order in a backwater part of the Imperium, only to wait for a certain someone to save the day when cosmic shit hits the galactic fan. Be their salvation in the darkest hour? I doubt anyone but the Emperor himself is capable of such a feat. In the lore I knew even after Robot Gilliman returned it wasn't exactly sunshine and roses awaiting the renowned Primarch, and he was the real deal. This story had all the hallmarks of some powerful entities laying down the groundwork for their schemes and letting the lesser people toil till they dropped written all over it. I was contemplating the story when the corner of my mind registered multiple incoming aircraft through my link with the Fortress Machine Spirit. It was the same Aquila lander Alicia was riding in earlier, and it now had 4 fighter escorts. Alicia, will your canoness be arriving in the same lander you rode? Probably. Why? I think she is here. We ended up receiving the canoness with 2 other sisters in another meeting room with spotless reflective walls. This room was much grander than the room I had used earlier, probably in a show of respect to the Order's highest-ranking member visiting. Present with me was Alicia and Wellmana. Then Verita joined in representing the Inquisition instead of Neandra due to their request to keep certain sensitive matters within the Adepta. We all stood up as the 3 new visitors stepped through the door with the canoness leading in the front, the floor clicking with the steps of their power armor boots. You could feel the air of piousness they carried as they entered the room. The canoness looked to be in her 40s and had surprisingly delicate features considering her position. She looked impressive in her personalized ornate power armor, which was half covered with an elaborately embroidered cloak featuring a hood. A huge symbol of the mini-storm was shining proudly below her collar. The 2 sisters who arrived with her were obviously elite warriors of the Order. One of them was carrying a long object covered by a silk cloth with purity seals plastered all over it. While they looked decent enough, they exuded so much martial prowess in their demeanor I suspected even drunken hooligans would not dare to approach them, One of them even had a small fleur-de-lis tattooed under her left eye. Alicia, Wellmana, and Verita all bowed deeply while simultaneously performing the Aquila hand sign towards the canoness. At a loss of what to do for my proper etiquette but suspecting I should not follow the sisters, I merely performed the Aquila hand sign. The canoness pulled back her hood, returned the gesture, and stood perfectly still looking at me. After a while, just before it started giving me the creep, she finally spoke. "Greetings, I am Canoness Deepedina. You must be Lady SYRINE. I heard you had entered the inner sanctum." "Inner sanctum? You meant the place where I met Sister Alicia?" I inquired while glancing at the Palatine, and the latter was fast on returning an affirmative expression. Canoness Deepedina nodded and continued, "Your arrival was foretold by our founder. It was unfortunate this happened at the worst possible time and resulted in your amnesia. I apologize if my actions appeared hasty, but our situation is getting dire and time is scarce." She then gestured to the sister who was carrying a long object, and the sister stepped forward, carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a huge sheathed sword that looked too big to be wielded with one hand for an average human. The sister respectfully presented the hilt end of the sword towards Deepedina. The canoness muttered a quick prayer before pulling out the sword in one go with both hands. A blinding flash filled the room as the mirror-finished blade exited its sheath. "Behold, the nameless sword," Deepedina said. I heard Alicia gulp at the sight of their order's holiest relic, and all eyes in the room were looking at the shimmering blade. The canoness admired the sword reverently while explaining to me, though impressive, this relic is only a really sharp piece of almost indestructible metal forged with incredible skill. The reality was, any decent power sword will outperform it, so it was rarely used on the battlefield. However, she looked at me and continued, there were records of it behaving like a power sword and more in the heat of battle during dire circumstances, which should have been impossible due to the sword having no power circuit nor power source. Deepedina paused for a while before turning to her colleague, Sister Wellmana. "Have you briefed Lady SYRINE about our founding legends yet?" "Yes, my canoness," the dialogous sister quickly replied. "Good," Deepedina said and approached me with the huge sword. "There is one more legend that was only passed down from each successive canoness, until now." She stopped in front of me and presented the hilt of the sword towards my side. "It was said the true and holy daughter of the Emperor will appear in our darkest hour to lead us, and the nameless sword shall be her witness." Wait, what? While I might be this prophesied figure they spoke of, I was definitely no warrior, let alone wielding a sword. What am I supposed to do? "Just hold the sword," Deepedina nudged. Looking at the large blade, I hesitated and wanted to decline. "I am no warrior, canoness." "Please, my lady, a final verification if you will. This is the secret directive my order passed down since our founding." Everyone was looking at me expectantly. I gulped, touched the hilt of the sword, and picked it up. It was surprisingly lighter than it looked. I ran Analytica on it, and it simply read Nameless Sword. Its size was on the larger end, probably due to it being built as a single-handed weapon for a Space Marine size end user in mind. In my hands, it sort of resembled the size of a slightly larger bastard sword. I raised the sword with both hands, had its blade stood upright pointing at the ceiling, and was enlightened to the fact that this was a perfectly balanced blade, a truly remarkable piece of work. Intrigued by the level of craftsmanship invested into a piece of metal that was meant for killing, I turned it slowly while watching the light reflect on its mirror finish. It was then out of the blue that a weird sensation hit me. I had a distinct feeling someone or something was reaching out to me, and my thought acceleration activated in case this was an attack. Just as the world slowed down, a flat and artificial-sounding message wormed itself into my consciousness. ++ you passed the preliminary scan. For the next level of activation, insert your blood into the sword fuller. ++. Wait, who was communicating with me? I looked around and eventually my eyes settled on the sword. This sword is imbued with artificial intelligence? The need for blood or any other bodily fluid to activate a gene lock was not a new thing in this universe. I recalled a scene in the lore where an infamous Primarch licked on a data slate to bypass a high-security measure. I looked at the sword again and decided to do as it advised, but I was too big a pansy to cut my finger with its edge. "Sister Verita." I held out my hand to her. "If you please, kindly prick my finger so I might get a few drops of blood." She was surprised, but quickly went to work with haste. A few seconds later, and it was done. It was wise to leave it to the professionals. All the sisters watched with bated breath as I gingerly dropped my blood into the sword's fuller. ++. Nothing happened. Did I make a fool of myself? Then a loud chime sounded from the sword. startling everyone in the room, and more messages started reaching my mind. Gene code accepted. Next level activation started. As the sword came alive, alarmingly, I felt it started drawing heat and energy from me. Just as I was about to panic and drop it, the sword passed the energy back to me, and an energy loop of sorts formed. Faster and faster the energy circulated until I felt like the weapon had become an extension of my limbs. An energy field suddenly flickered to life around the blade of the sword, showering the meeting room with pure blue light while the sisters gasped. "This is..." "The azurious glow," Wellmana whispered with her shaking voice. "Last recorded sighting was over 2 centuries ago." While this looked pretty, I was unsure of its stability and decided to test it. Like a noob, I did some mock swings with the weapon and stopped when remembering I really was no warrior with 0 training in swordsmanship. My sword swing probably looked so amateurish I wonder if it made the battle sisters cringe. The good news was the energy field persisted and was not going anywhere. "So, it is just a fancy power sword?" I queried while marveling at the glowing sword. "My lady, it is running without a power source." Didina replied with unconcealed excitement. Maybe that sounded like a miracle on the surface, but I reckoned it should be just some fancy mechanic like the luxury Rolex watches running solely on kinetic energy but scaled up with space-age technology mixed with a bit of throne-knows-what sorcery. Personally, I was not that impressed due to the simple fact that using this weapon still implied one had to walk up to people and chop them up within arm's reach. I looked again at the shimmering blue light on the mirror blade and had to admit, impractical as it was going melee into a battlefield brimming with guns, the sword with its energy field activated was enchantingly beautiful. Then an idea hit me. What if I introduced my psychic energy to the circulation? Though I loathed the idea of activating Psychona Activa, as I still had so much to learn about the perils of the warp, my curiosity got the better of me. Just a little while should be fine, I thought, and went psychic active. Psychona Activa activated. The world went trippy as expected, but this time I was ready for it. Psychic energy reacted to my active state and swirled around and inside me, then onto the sword, adding another layer of energy into the circulation. Then it happened. Starting with a hint of fluctuation in the energy field, a second later a brilliant fire burst forth into existence and the whole blade was covered in a dazzling blue flame. Astonished by this sudden development, I almost dropped the sword again but immediately noticed no heat coming from the conflagration. "This is psychic flame?" I moved my fingers near the raging spectral inferno and confirmed no rise in temperature. How peculiar. Mesmerized by the pretty light show, my whole attention was transfixed on it for a while until I remembered there were still other people in the room. Now that I think about it, they were awfully quiet. Flustered by my ability to get lost in my little world, which would undoubtedly look like a lack of proper manners, I turned my attention back to them and was surprised to see all the sisters, including the canoness, knelt before me. Speaking in a voice shaking with religious fervor, Didina proclaimed with the tone of finality, "Revered Lady SYRINE, I, Didina Grace, canoness of the Order of the Shining Beacon, hereby officially recognize you as the prophesied holy daughter of the Emperor. Please take over the command of the Order and lead us as you will." Wait, activating a flaming sword doesn't prove any, I wanted to say, but caught a sight that made me froze. There on the many spotless mirror-like surfaces inside the meeting room were the reflections of a fair maiden standing tall, holding a huge sword crackling with raging azurious flame, and around her head was the unmistakable holy radiance of a golden halo. Chapter 18: The Emperor's Daughter. My heart's almost stopped as I got a better look at my own reflection. The familiar yet so very distant girl was staring back, eyes gleaming brightly with a golden glow, coupled with an unknown source of illumination that seemed to originate from around her head. She exuded a magnificent level of saintly presence that compelled subservience. There was a sort of religious piousness resonating in the air. I could even feel the level of faith the sisters were emanating in their willingness to serve. Through the acknowledgement of the canoness and my legitimacy established by the legends from the Order's founder, in a way I have my very own army now. Without prompting, my mind was already running some cold calculations. It was understood if I played the card of being the Emperor's daughter well, with but a word of command the whole Order would mobilize against the rebels head-on despite the odds. The Sororita's very own zealotry and subscription to the Emperor's divinity would see them grinding forward regardless of casualties. We could probably do it too, with help from Cryptor on electronics warfare and intelligence. Together with the support of the governor's forces, we could strike into the heart of the rebels and decapitate its leadership. Ending this threat now, and be prepared for the real incoming crises. The whole Sororita's order could get into position before the enemies even knew what hit them, with a total shutdown of their communication network. To increase the odds of success, I would need to be leading in the front with this ridiculous flaming sword in hand and ceaselessly using my authority to turn the rebels' mightiest weapons on themselves. All the while spamming thought acceleration to always be on top of every tactical situation. If we were lucky enough, we might even be able to get close enough for me to cut down the enemy leaders with this sword. Rendered leaderless and in the chaos of the battlefield, the bulk of the rebel forces would be easily destroyed by our coordinated front. Hundreds of thousands of rebels would be grounded to dust. Valor and glory await. There will be casualties, hopefully on an acceptable level. Too bad we did not have access to Astartes unit to lead as the spirit. Wait, what am I doing? If only I could know what would happen if that idea was put into action. Then I noticed a new line appearing in my vision. Run simulation? Yes/no. Simulation? That's new, but this unknown service had yet to fail me. I chose yes without hesitation. Simulation activated. There was a flash. Suddenly, I was transported into a battlefield where dust was omnipresent and explosions were constantly thundering in the background. Dead bodies littered everywhere and endless streams of tracers lit up the sky. My superhuman mind was registering over 100 immediate threats, and over 1,000 background information were fighting for my attention. The enemy's communication network was down, but having nowhere to go, most of them had resolved to fight to the death. Every street and alley was jam-packed with entrenched soldiers. Despite constant airstrikes and artillery bombardments, they did not yield. Again, they had nowhere to go, and this place might probably be their home. Faint cries of children could even be heard between earth-shattering explosions. Nearby, the bulk of enemy elite troops had barricaded themselves, resulting in brutal close-quarters fighting that could only be described as a colossal meat grinder. Squads and squads of sisters under the cover fire of constant bolter barrage got close to their quarry, their power armor deflecting hails of small arms fire raining down on them. Once they got close enough, they let loose of their flammers and meltas to burn a way through, their grisly progress marked by the smell of burnt flesh filling the air under a sky darkened with misery. Under my direct command, the sisters would not falter, but the enemies would not yield. This war was started on the basis of labeling the rebels as heretics. Being condemned as such, they knew their only way out was to fight to their death. This was a bloody mess and a literal hell on earth. Any non-veteran of such large-scale warfare will probably not make it through. Just as that thought flashed through my mind, I caught sight of several fallen sisters in a huge crater not far from me. Compelled by an unspeakable ominous feeling, I approached the crater with trepidation and took a closer look. There amongst the fallen was a familiar face, the first person I met in this world. Palatine Alicia Sabatif lay dead in the crater. She was a literal bloody mess, but even under that pile of brain matter, there was still enough of her face to identify her. Being caught in between zeal and inexperience, or even just plain bad luck, had probably taken her life. Looking at Alicia's corpse amidst a background of constant muffled explosions, I felt my soul leaving my body. But wait, didn't she just kneel down happily before me mere moments ago? My eyes snapped open and I was back in the meeting room. A quick check on the chronometer told me it was just a few seconds after I saw my own reflections. Gasping for air despite not feeling out of breath, I quickly turned off Psychona Activa, while ignoring a few Regulus messages that had popped up in my vision. As I got back into the sweet embrace of normalcy, in the reflections my halo and the raging blue flames on my sword started slowly fading away. My mind was still racing from what I saw, but the sight of Alicia well and alive had calmed my shaken nerves. Was that a simulation mixed with a bit of prescience? I looked around, found no answer, and could no longer just keep the sisters waiting. But that brief vision of the hellish battlefield had shown me how lacking I was in real war experience and leadership capacity. If I were to lead now, it will only end up in a real disaster. I calmed myself further and approached the kneeling canoness. That is something I will not do at the moment. Sisters, please rise. I decided. Yadina looked up but did not stand. Lady SYRINE, please accept the command of the order. She pleaded with me again. While I might be the person your prophecy spoke of, I admitted, please understand I am sorely lacking in experience and am suffering from partial memory loss. Pushing me to lead the order now is just asking for the ruination of the Emperor's domain. I will definitely act with his best interest in mind. So please, stand up so we may work on how to proceed forward. As you have said, we need to make haste to save this world. Rise, sisters, we have much to discuss. With that, the canoness reluctantly stood up, followed by the rest of the sisters. I handed back the nameless sword to the canoness, symbolically passing the leadership role for the order back to her. She seemed to understand this and received the sword reverently, but could not hide her disappointment completely as she watched the blue light slowly disappearing on the blade. Now, before we speak further, there is an important thing I have to verify with you all. The accursed 13th Black Crusade is in full swing, is it not? I asked. Yedina nodded grimly at my question. What was the last major news you received before communication was cut off from the rest of the Imperium? Yedina thought for a while before replying. Nothing much. Last we heard there was some really heavy engagement happening around Cadia. We were bracing for any eventual spillovers before getting caught off guard by the local uprising. That was it. I had confirmed that the news of the fortress world of Cadia falling never reached here. Naturally, I had tried looking it up on the fortress database with no results, but I had to be sure. How would they take the news? Listen well, sisters, you might wish to not believe what I am about to tell you. But let the Emperor be my witness. What I am going to say is the truth. I said while I started digging into my memory of the lore on how Cadia was destroyed. I had the thick cover campaign book in my collection back in my geek life after all. Knowing the extremely heavy nature of the story, I had the sisters seated before telling them about how at the climax of the Black Crusade, Abaddon the Chaos War Master had dragged and dropped a Blackstone fortress onto Cadia, breaking the planet apart. How Cadia was housing the mysterious Necron pylons that had been controlling the Eye of Terror. How this resulted in the great rift known as Cicatrix Maledictum being unleashed unto the Imperium, breaking it into two, and it probably was the reason why the light of the Emperor had stopped reaching us. The sisters were still while listening, but their faces grew visibly more serious as the story progressed. Foreseeing all this, I had used the calmest tone possible when telling the story, as I was quite sure if this information were to be told by any other person, it would instantly be labeled as heresy. The only other sound other than my voice in the room was by Wellmanoa's autoquill as she diligently scribbled down stuff onto her data slate in a valiant effort to record down what I had said. Not sure why she bothered unless voice recording was prohibited due to security reasons. After I finished talking, Yedina asked the obvious question. Pardon me, but I had to ask, where did you get all that first-hand information? If I were to tell her the truth that I read about it from a gaming campaign book and saw the Blackstone Fortress dropped on Cadia in a cutscene of a video game, even the canoness with all her mental fortitude might have gone insane. So I conjured as much sincerity as possible and told them with a straight face. I got them from the highest source possible before arriving here. Whether it was by design or fate, for reasons I myself could not fathom, that part of my memory is intact. Which was technically true. There were no higher sources than the publisher themselves, unless they retcon it later, but that would not be my fault. The room was dead silent after I finished briefing the sisters on the fall of Cadia. They could use some time to absorb the shock, so I waited. The sister who had a small fleur-de-lis tattooed under her left eye was the first to break the silence. So, how do we move forward, and what is the Emperor's plan for us? Happy that someone had asked the critical question to move forward, I turned to the sister, which prompted her to quickly bow and introduce herself. I am Celestian Superior Marquila Moret. Honored to make your acquaintance, Lady SYRINE. Marquila was a fierce but fine-looking lady with short-length copper-blonde hair just reaching the bottom of her neck. The right side of her ear was covered with a sophisticated-looking Vox device. While all the members of the sororitas I have met so far seemed very capable, from my hunch, Sister Marquila tops the list of being the most dangerous of them all. She would easily be a champion of the order if such a position exists. Looking at her serious face, I felt a tad bit uncomfortable for such a lady showing me this degree of reverence. If my predictions are correct, little to no reinforcements will be coming. I had worked with the last astropath on this planet the whole of yesterday night, and we only ever managed to make contact with the Imperial worlds within the subsector. There was little response, so I continued. Our main goal for the moment should be ending this uprising as soon as possible with minimal casualties. As for the Emperor's will, the very mention of the Emperor had all the sisters perked up, but I had nothing to offer. My mind drew blank, but looking at the sisters, I knew some directive was needed for them to chew on, no matter how vague it was. Then I recalled an opening cutscene from a certain Grimdark video game. After a brief moment of thought acceleration to organize the script, I looked them in their eyes and recited the opening scene dialogue with some modifications. Sisters, the Imperium has always been besieged by aliens and monsters, attacked from within by heretics and rebels. For 10,000 years it has endured, because of the faithful like you all. By his will and with me by your side, we shall stand against the coming darkness and see to it the light of humanity is not lost in this part of the galaxy. Chapter 19: The Way Forward. Unbelievable as it sounds, I had refused to immediately take over the command of a whole Sororita's army. While my old gamer self might have strangled myself on that, a simulated side of the battlefield had shown me how different things look when put into real practice. I was not worthy, nor was I ready to take the responsibility for the lives of people under my command yet. I spent the rest of the meeting briefed by the sisters on the details on the front and the upcoming decisive battle. The Sororitas had attempted a few strategic operations to eliminate the rebels' leadership, but these always ended in failure due to superior tactical maneuvers on the other side. Or they could be too blunt a force with their modus operandi for such operations since they were hardly subtle, resulting in mass casualties. Both sides had fought to an eventual stalemate and were now accumulating war assets on a front line that was the size of a country. It was now a stare-down contest with random small skirmishes happening constantly. Didina passed me her data slate to show me a current report of the forces gathering on the front line. For a split second, I was lost looking at all the unfamiliar low Gothic characters before something kicked in, and I was able to read it as if it was my first language. I took a look at the estimated numbers of forces on both sides and felt a bit dizzy. Due to the steady escalations on the scale of engagement, the sisters were eventually regulated to spearhead roles in the Civil War, and the mother of all fights was bearing down on both sides soon. Since neither side had any major technological advantage over the other, a confrontation would just be a numbers game of attrition that would result in catastrophic loss of life and material. Then my curiosity plus old habits as a gamer kicked in, and I requested to have a look at the current total war assets available to the Order. Didina obliged, taking back her data slate, and after accessing the information passed it back to me. The summary was extensive. It was like looking at the dream miniature collection list of a Sororitas player on steroids. A full militant Order Minories was here, with active battle sisters in service numbering around 3,000 and 25,000 more either in training, non-combat, or support roles. The hardware section was equally impressive. Even with the supposed heavy casualties suffered, the Order still maintained a sizable number of rhinos, immolators, and exorcist tanks in active service. There were even a few rare repressor tanks in the mix. Of the sisters active in combat roles, there was a healthy mix of all the standard Adepta units except for those with repenting elements involved like Repinches and Penitent Engines. These were relatively few and far between their ranks, probably due to their doctrine or already being wasted on the front lines. "Are you aware of Archdominus Cryptor's plan?" I inquired while looking at the data. "I am afraid not," she replied. "We hardly talked in our brief meeting, but he seemed determined to end this conflict as soon as possible." Scrolling down further on the asset list, I came across some unknown listing that was interesting. "What are these?" I asked. Didina took a look at the listings in question and answered. "The Nuntius Hailer Flyers? These are low-orbiting aircraft with macro-laud hailers used to project bellowed hymnals into the upper atmosphere to broadcast messages for repentance echo down over unbelievers. There is the Nuntius Imagifier variant, which is used to project giant holograms instead. Are they operational?" I was really curious. "Of course, our Order took the maintenance of its war assets as a matter of priority," answered Didina with a hint of pride. "Interestingly, these are the type of units one reads in the lore but never made it to the game." I took a closer look at the Flyer's operational capabilities, and the power gamer inside me started turning at the possible cheesy tactics I could do with these. "Didina, if we show the rebels an overwhelming superiority in strength and righteousness, do you suppose we can convince the bulk of their army to surrender?" The canonist pondered on my question for a while before answering. "I suppose so. It is not as if they were worshippers of ruinous power. I believe the bulk of them were merely grunts pushed into the Civil War without knowing better." The path forward was suddenly cleared up. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath before issuing my first ever directive to the Order. "Sisters, if we are to have a better chance to stand against the oncoming darkness, the first thing we need to do will be winning the upcoming decisive battle with as minimal casualties and destruction as possible. To that end, we will need the full cooperation of the Governor's forces and the help of Adeptus Mechanicus from Archdominus Cryptor. I contacted Tech Priest Taliad, who was still stationed inside the fortress, and an hour later a holographic conference was securely set up again. Canonist Didina, Palatine Alicia, and Celestian Superior Markila joined in this time. Cryptor's giant hologram appeared in the meeting room, eerily recreating that iconic scene from a certain classic sci-fi movie again. He noticed the extra participants, bowed, and waited for me to talk first. "Crypto, Canonist Didina is here representing the whole Sororitas Order. I have reviewed your plan, and would like to make a few adjustments. But first, please update us on the situation on the front line. Cryptor bowed again and began to speak with his crispy metallic voice. As you wish, the opposition continues to accumulate war assets in the front. Our surveillance network now registered close to 500,000 troops and 4,000 battle tanks on their side. 3 super heavy tanks are also noted within their ranks. The Archdominus then conjured out a 3-dimensional map with many red and green dots and continued. Governor Catalina's forces also continued to accumulate on the front line with close to 600,000 troops and 3,200 battle tanks. A statement had to be made regarding the quality of the forces, as while the governor has more listed manpower, the numerical advantage is superficial as a substantial portion of that troops are made up of substandard volunteers and reserve units, whereas the heretic side is boosted by a few elite battalions by this world standard. A direct confrontation would only yield us a 9% chance of victory with over 80% casualties, a catastrophic result which we must avoid. The preparation for the plan is going well with elements of my forces doing the final adjustments. We are constantly updating the details to suit the changing situation on the front line. Plan? What plan are we talking about? Diadina asked. It was developed less than 24 hours ago. Only Inquisitor Thorn was informed of it to prevent it from leaking. I explained. Crypto, please show us the updated plan. We could incorporate certain key areas with the full participation of the Sororitas Order. Very well, Cryptor ran his presentation again with updated information and noticeable improvements on his grand cheesy plan. Diadina soon caught on to the key factor in the whole scheme, Archdominus cycle. May I ask, how are we supposed to collapse their communication network? Cryptor returned to me silently asking if he should disclose my ability. I nodded in response. He proceeded with his explanation. Lady SYRINE here has the authority to overwrite most, if not all, primary functions of Imperial hardware with a cogitator or machine spirit. Together with my assets, we can achieve the said action for a brief period of time, enough for us to totally incapacitate the opposition leader's capacity to manage the battle. Shocked by what she heard, the canoness asked me, "Revered lady, is that true?" Not gonna lie, getting called lady twice in quick succession had dampened my mood somewhat, but I was sure Regulus will keep it out of my face. Trying to avoid further questioning, I carefully framed my answer to Diadina. Yes, it was a gift from my father. As predicted, the mere mention of SYRINE's supposed father, i.e. the Emperor himself, sent the sisters into quick silent prayers, opening my chance to present my objective for this meeting. Crypto, what is the estimated number of troops left to defend this world after this operation is over? Around 400,000 with whatever leftover auxiliary forces not participating in the upcoming battle. He answered. Will that be enough to defend the whole planet for whatever that will come after this? I pushed. Hardly sufficient, Cryptor admitted. I nodded in agreement and finally got to my point. In the light of that, and for a better security of this world, I propose we give them a chance to surrender, throw them a rope to return to the Emperor's service before going down that senseless bloody path. I looked to the sisters to see if they had any objection to this. They simply bowed in agreement, so I pushed forth with my crazy plan. As of this moment, from now on please refrain from calling the opposition heretics. It is not as if they had officially renounced the Emperor. To do so will leave no room for their redemption. We have the means to give them a chance to return to the righteous path, and this is how it can be achieved. A few hours later, it was close to the morning when I finally got out of the meeting and headed back to my room. Most of the sisters had left hurriedly to actualize the final plan we agreed on for the upcoming decisive battle. My body still felt fresh as ever, but mentally I was utterly exhausted. Looking at the sisters grinding the details away and the planning dead into the night as unaugmented humans had my respect for them went up a few notches. Darn, these ladies are tough. Diadina's firm grasp on the finer details of the army unit's capabilities greatly contributed to the final shape of the plan. Something I would be forever grateful for, since I was basically just theory crafting from what I knew of the universe with no real hands-on experience. The whole planning part reminded me of the late-night preparation for the apocalypse scale games I had in my gamer days, except this was 1,000 times bigger with real lives on the line. Any planned movement of the pieces shown on the tactical display entailed thousands of lives into the meat grinder. You could say I felt a bit numb at the end of all the talks of statistics. Suddenly, a psychic message from HIATUS reached out to me. Plus, Lady SYRINE, I beg for your forgiveness for my rude intrusion, but new developments are happening. I am at the chamber and need your guidance. Plus, mentally exhausted and saddled with countless looming problems on my mind, I almost lashed out at him before recognizing he sounded a lot like a hapless employee who was put into an impossible position. A position which I was not a total stranger with during my time working in a corporation. I took a deep breath before replying, plus very well, I am close and just got out from a meeting. Will come to see you now. Plus, while that was not exactly true, but I needed a walk. A short while later, and I was at the makeshift telepathic chamber Thabarus had set up for the astropath. In truth, it was little more than a controlled space with rudimentary psychic wards and security. This was not my first time here. I waved and passed the black-cladding inquisitorial stormtroopers guarding the entrance to the chamber. A large display was on the wall with HIATUS vital signs shown in real time. Just in case the unthinkable happened, these guys were given the authorization to utilize lethal force. HIATUS was coming down from the primary altar when I entered. The stormtrooper sergeant who was in charge of his safety was here too with 2 other troopers. I understood it to be a standard procedure at the end of a work shift to make sure the astropath was not compromised by the warp. The sergeant nodded at me and left the chamber with his subordinates. I turned to HIATUS and was surprised to find him soaked with sweat as if just done with a gym session. What happened? I asked while taking a closer look at the astropath, finding him looking exhausted but still indomitable in spirit. Please excuse me for being less than presentable at the moment. There has been a sudden surge of telepathic messages reaching us, and I was slightly taxed to the limit of my capability. He pointed to the servitors dedicated to recording telepathic sessions. Some long scrolls were dragging on the floor from all the recording done. While most modern office dwellers would be puzzled at the sight of scrolls, the Grimdark imperial bureaucracy loved their physical records. I moved closer to take a look and was stunned by the contents. On the scrolls were rows and rows of recorded incoming telepathic messages from all the warp-traveling starships operating in the area. Some were asking for the real space location of the beacon and others broadcasting their intent to breach into real space near to us. A realization dawned on me. This whole sector was being cut off from the Emperor's light. As a result, the psychic beacon lit up by SYRINE had become the only detectable reference point for long-distance warp navigation for thousands of light-years across the entire region. So how should we reply? Asked HIATUS. Well, how is this usually done? I asked back, well aware of the many lives at stake here. We never had this much traffic before. By default, this should be referred to the governor, but the usual communication between the telepathic chamber and her office were severed since the incident, and she has been busy with the war. My mind was turning at the situation. This was the best description I could give for our predicament. This world was like a backwater town which suddenly found itself as the focal access point for all the traffic within the province while its mayor was busy having a shootout with close to half the armed folks living here. Like it or not, a lot of things were coming to this world, and it would become the epicenter of the entire subsector. I had my work cut out for me with this mess, and my important appointment with Inquisitor Thabarus was but a few hours away. Chapter 20 Thabarus Notes. A very important meeting happened just slightly after the wee hours on the day that the rebels were expected to launch their decisive major offensive. Inquisitor Thabarus Thorn had always liked to set up mind games when having to interview any interesting individual by himself. He would spend time working on a few initial scenarios and from there deployed his art of information gathering. However, the way this meeting started had defied his expectation, and his carefully crafted plans crumbled in the face of that. May the Emperor preserve me. He sighed at her outstretched hands that were aiming for his hat and wrote down the date of the interview on his notes. It was 999.M41. 80 years of active service in the Holy Inquisition, and Thabarus Thorn had never felt so flabbergasted. Routine surveillance entailing of several heretical cults had ended in the most unusual of circumstances. He and his merry little inquisitorial warband were now stuck on a planet with a massive active psychic beacon. Sitting across him was SYRINE, the mysterious transhuman amnesiac who was partly responsible for his current predicament. After a rudimentary search about her background came back completely blank, Thabarus decided to put in more effort to dig deeper. He went as far as intercepting her luggage that was arriving from the Mechanica ship, and the information he found only further deepened his concerns. Amongst the little possessions she had, the most remarkable items were her collection of seemingly simple-looking robes, clothes, and body gloves. However, a preliminary scan revealed them to be anything but simple, and his retinue had to request the use of his inquisitorial rosette to access more detailed, restricted information. It turned out that the fabric used for her clothes closely resembled the same classified material used on the banners of the Emperor's personal guardians, the fabled Adeptus Custodes. The quality of the fabric was in a league of its own amongst the countless materials the Imperium has access to. Not only was it as smooth and comfortable as the highest quality silks, but it was also practically indestructible against small arms fire, to say nothing of wear and tear resistance. Thabris knew the banners of Adeptus Astartes, the lesser cousins of the Custodes, could fly even in the face of apocalyptic firepower on the nightmarish battlefield of the 41st millennium. And with the common enough knowledge that whatever the Astartes can do, the Custodes can do better, he could assume that the banners of Adeptus Custodes would not only be made of far sterner stuff, but that acquiring said material was beyond the reach of most people even with significant wealth and power. Further adding to the mystery, most of her collection of clothes was dated to be made over 1,000 years ago. The result of all that made SYRINE's origins highly disconcerting. When they finally had the chance to sit down and talk, she had a most unusual request, asking to take a closer look at his hat. After a moment of hesitation, he handed the armored Capitaine over. SYRINE took the hat and marveled at the details of the stylized emblem of the Inquisition. Her expression of admiration rather than the common fear people exhibited towards the symbol of the Holy Inquisition only further exacerbated his concerns. Just as Thabris was thinking that this could not get any more unusual, he observed the lady turn his hat until the stylized eye was facing him. Then she put the hat on. Slowly, she struck up an akimbo pose and declared in a haughty tone, "No one expects the Inquisition." There was some context missing here as Thabris failed to understand her antics, and no one else was around to possibly provide a clue. Despite protests from representatives of the Adeptus Sororitas, Adeptus Mechanicus, and even members of his retinue, he had insisted this talk session be a private one-on-one. She smiled, beaming with an expression that was completely at odds with the situation they were currently in. "Thank you. I always wanted to do that," SYRINE said as she returned his hat. "It's heavier than I expected." Then, as if donning a mask, her face turned completely neutral. The previous joyous expression was completely gone. "Now, let us talk." Over the decades in his line of work, Thabris had developed what was akin to a sixth sense for discerning the truth from conversations with his subjects. He could learn a lot from what was said, and his mastery of the art of interrogation allowed him to learn a lot more from what was not spoken. Thabris had taken great pains to study the subject of human body language. He dove deep into decoding the hidden meanings behind sitting postures, hand positions, breathing patterns, and the pattern of speech. Thousands of hours were spent watching pict feeds so he could learn to observe the twitching of facial muscles that were usually too fast for human eyes. More than once, Inquisitor Thabris Thorn had dropped his verdict even before the subject of his interrogation had a chance to speak. To Thabris' credit, his judgment had always been validated upon further detailed investigations. He was supremely confident of his skills, but that evaporated when he met SYRINE. She was sitting across him, her face and pose set to an almost inhuman neutral expression. Her deep silver eyes bore straight into him, and she was utterly still, the periodical blinking the only reminder that he was not looking at a lifelike sculpture of idealized perfection. Maintaining eye contact and studying her seemingly more than human features was both mesmerizing and unnerving. After a moment of silence, Thabris decided to break the uneasy stalemate by making himself a cup of recaf from the delicate tea set that was strategically placed on the table. It was an old but proven technique, mostly used when the interviewee in question was not necessarily an enemy of the Imperium and receptive to courteous diplomacy. "You want one?" He offered a cup to SYRINE almost naturally. It was not every day one would be in a position where an Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor offered to make you a hot drink. "No thank you." He had expected as much and was slightly impressed. It was not every day someone could so simply refuse an Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor without a hint of using their own authority. They sat silently for a while more, and for the moment, Thabris was content to just sit down quietly and slowly sip his recaf. He decided to try another old technique, letting the interviewee speak first and hopefully become more willing to share. "Inquisitor," she eventually said, staring blankly down at the table. "Is that sorrow? Or regret?" Thabris started thinking. His decades of experience started working hard to read her underlying emotions. "I have dire news and would like to go straight to the point." There was a slight pause before she continued. "This was told to the sisters yesterday night, and I had requested Sister Verita not to inform you of this particular issue before our meeting." Thabris resolved to keep his composure and nodded for her to continue. "I believe Cadia has been destroyed," SYRINE said softly. He read nothing but the truth in her words. "We need to work together to dash." The sound of breaking glass interrupted her mid-sentence. Looking down, Thabris found he had dropped his cup of hot recaf. Steaming hot liquid was soaking into his armored body glove, but all he felt was bone-chilling coldness. She looked up and continued, "Inquisitor, we are just starting." Her face was still a wall of neutrality. 2 hours later, Thabris stumbled out of the meeting room. Waiting for him just around the corner were the most trusted members of his retinue. Sensing the Inquisitor was not in his usual state of mind, Neandra rushed to him, crossing the distance of several meters in the blink of an eye. "Are you all right?" she asked. By the throne, Thabris muttered while shaking his head, a streak of sweat forming on his forehead. "I feel like my recent rejuvenate treatment has been totally undone. Check on him." Neandra told the rest of the team, but before any of them could react, Thabris held up a hand, standing them down. "Don't bother," he said, opening a part of his greatcoat to reveal several high-grade hexagrammic wards, designed to protect against psychic attacks, pinned to the inside of it. They never reacted. "We just talked. It was just a talk. Just a talk." A most extraordinary talk, Thabris thought to himself. His mind was doing a quick recap of the last 2 hours. Of all the things SYRINE had revealed to him, Thabris had counted no less than a dozen of these, if true, would warrant him to instantly silence any Imperial bystander who didn't enjoy a relatively high clearance on classified information. Most of the information sounded ridiculous the first time he heard it, but her following detailed descriptions soon changed his mind on their credibility. The most shocking of all was her prophecies. Oh, the prophecies. Robert Gilliman shall return. She had said it without any hint of doubt or deception. For the very first time in his grim career, Thabris wanted to doubt his own readings. She was either delusional or telling the truth. Neither was a laughing matter. What had really shaken him was not just about the things she said, it was how she had said them. She was just so nonchalant about it. A brief moment back then, Thabris had this illusion they were just old friends sitting down having recaf, and she was giving him casual updates about some mundane hobby they both shared. By then, the supposed original primary objectives of the meeting, the discussion of SYRINE's identity in the upcoming major battle, had since fallen to the sideline as more time was ended up spent on discussing other topics. At this point, with all the information available to him, Thabris had to concede, despite his reluctance of admitting it outright. She might actually be who the Sororitas legends claimed to be, and her outrageous plan for the major battle might work. In conclusion, regardless of the absurdity of it all, supporting SYRINE's current activities here seemed to be the best way forward for the benefit of the Imperium. It was only after the talk Thabris noticed his notes never went beyond the date he wrote down initially, 999.m41. For a split second, Neandra thought she saw Thabris' hand tremble, and before she could verify it, he moved the hand to retrieve a small flask from inside his greatcoat. He then proceeded to open the flask and gulp down its contents in one go. "I thought you quit Amasek." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I did," Thabris answered, putting his flask away. "Sir, Fulton and Salih are here as requested. They just arrived." Acolyte Herlindia reported. "Shall I brief them on their appointment?" Thabris was about to approve that notion before an unconventional and somewhat mischievous idea came to him. Why should he be the only person to suffer the weird antics of that lady? Nah, no time. Just tell them under no circumstances can they treat her poorly. He finally said and sighed. Somehow the Inquisitor knew today was going to be a long day.